Chrysler PT Cruiser, Daewoo Lanos, Holden Vectra, SsangYong Rodius, Ford Falcon AU Series 1, Proton Gen 2, Mitsubishi 380, Pontiac Aztek. These cars were once parked in driveways right across Australia. People saved up for them, drove them off the lot feeling genuinely good about themselves. Now they're worth almost nothing. Today we're talking about all 8 of them, what went wrong, why the market turned its back, and why some of these falls were far more brutal than anyone expected. Let's get into it. Number 8. Chrysler PT Cruiser 2002-2010. In 2001, Chrysler had an idea that should not have worked as well as it did. Take a compact hatchback, style it like a 1930 seconds gangster getaway car, aim it directly at family buyers. For about 3 years it genuinely worked. The PT Cruiser was everywhere: school pickups, Westfield car parks, every coastal town from Noosa to Busselton. Dealers were struggling to keep them on the floor. Then the decade turned, and almost overnight, the PT Cruiser went from quirky to embarrassing. The problem wasn't purely aesthetic either. The exterior personality never matched the interior reality. Cramped boot, mediocre performance, reliability that gave owners plenty of time to reflect on their choices while waiting for the NERMA. Today, a running PT Cruiser fetches low for figures on a good day. Most don't make it that far. It went from impulse purchase to punchline inside a single decade. That's a fast fall. Number 7. Daewoo Lanos 1997-2004. Daewoo arrived in Australia with a straightforward pitch. Maximum car for minimum money, backed by a 3-year warranty that made the whole arrangement feel slightly more trustworthy. The Lanos wasn't terrible exactly. It was simply average in every direction, simultaneously uninspiring to drive, plasticky inside, and built by a company that was quietly collapsing financially while somehow still taking deposits at the front counter. When Daewoo filed for bankruptcy in 2000, the parts pipeline turned murky. Overnight, resale confidence evaporated almost immediately. Today, running examples are so thin on the ground they barely register on car listing sites. Most disappeared quietly into wreckers' yards, stripped for parts nobody was entirely sure were still available. A car specifically designed to be affordable ended up being worthless, not by coincidence. Number 6. Holden Vectra 1997-2003. This one might sting. Holden needed something to occupy the gap between the Astra and the Commodore, so they went to their European parent Opel and came back with the Vectra, rebadged and repositioned for the Australian market. On paper, completely reasonable; in practice, Australian buyers were deeply unconvinced. The Vectra wasn't a bad car by European standards, but it wasn't a Holden in any way that actually mattered to the people who'd been buying Commodores for 20 years. It felt foreign in a way nobody had asked for, and it was priced in a way that didn't reward the compromise. Sales were underwhelming. Holden phased it out with minimal ceremony. Today, Vectras sit at the lower end of the used market and don't move quickly. A forgotten chapter in the Holden story, and Holden eventually ran out of chapters altogether. Number 5. SsangYong Rodius 2004-2013. Right. This one deserves a moment. When the SsangYong Rodius launched, automotive journalists didn't just criticize it, they competed with each other for language. Top Gear famously nominated it as one of the ugliest cars ever built, and that wasn't considered a hot take. At the time, that was considered measured. The Rodius was a large Korean people mover that appeared to have been designed by 2 separate teams who never met and were each given only half the brief. The proportions were wrong, the details clashed. The interior was an exercise in good intentions meeting constrained execution, and yet people did buy them, mostly because they were cheap and carried 7 people without complaint. Cheap and practical doesn't hold value though. Today, Rodius people movers sit among the most heavily depreciated vehicles on the Australian used market. Some examples change hands for under $1,000. A car famous for being ugly is now famous for being nearly free. The two facts are not unrelated. Number 4. Ford Falcon AU Series 1 1998-2000. Here's where things get genuinely complicated. The AU Falcon wasn't just commercially disappointing, it actively damaged a nameplate that for decades of loyal Australians had built something close to emotional equity in. When Ford unveiled the AU in 1998, the reaction moved quickly from confused to cold to openly hostile. The interior was a dramatic redesign, space-age styling that felt more like a design school concept than something you'd actually live with for a decade. Early production quality issues gave buyers real reasons to walk People who'd been faithful Falcon owners since the XA felt like they'd been personally let down. Holden watched carefully and moved accordingly. Ford recovered over the subsequent series, but the Series 1AU never escaped its reputation, and today it sits at the bottom of the Falcon pricing ladder. Not because the mechanicals are particularly bad, because perception is permanent, and that launch left a mark that compound interest couldn't fix. A car that should have been a triumph became a masterclass in how badly you can misread your own customers. Number 3. Proton Gen 2 2004-2012. Malaysia's national car brand had a simple value proposition when it landed in Australia: more car per dollar than anything comparable. For buyers watching their budget, there was genuine appeal in that the Gen 2 was Proton's attempt at something modern and vaguely sporty: the right shape, reasonable equipment, priced where the competition couldn't easily follow. The driving experience told a different story. The dynamics were a generation behind what Japanese and Korean rivals had already normalized. Interior quality showed its limitations quickly, and Proton's Australian sales never found the sustainable base the brand needed to stay. They eventually exited the market. Today, Gen 2 values are essentially negligible. Parts availability is patchy. Running examples are curiosities more than commuters. A car that promised a lot for the money delivered very little of either in the long run. Number 2. Mitsubishi 380 2005-2008. This is where it gets genuinely sad. The Mitsubishi 380 was the last car ever built by Mitsubishi in Australia. When the Adelaide production line stopped in 2008, around 900 jobs went with it: real people, real families, real ends to careers that had run their whole working lives inside that factory. The 380 itself wasn't a bad vehicle. Smooth, comfortable, reasonably equipped. But it arrived late into a large car segment, being squeezed from every direction up against the Commodore and Falcon's heritage and performance pedigree, and against cheaper imports that were eroding the whole category from below. Sales never came close to what was needed to save it. Today, the 380 is one of the cheapest large sedans on the Australian used market. They're still out there, buyers are harder to find. A car that represented the end of an entire manufacturing era is now mostly remembered for what its closure meant to the people who built it, rather than what the car itself was. That's not entirely fair to the 380, but that's the story it got stuck with. Number 1. Pontiac Aztek 2001-2005. Some cars fail quietly. This one failed in front of the entire planet. The Pontiac Aztek has a genuinely unusual distinction. It's the car widely credited with accelerating the collapse of an entire American brand. Designers who worked on it have since spoken publicly about how internal cost-cutting gutted an original concept that might have been genuinely bold. What remained was something the market found almost impossible to look at directly. The proportions didn't resolve, the execution missed, the response was brutal and sustained, and then strangely Breaking Bad happened. Walter White drove an Aztek for 5 seasons, and the show used that very specificity as character shorthand for a man who'd stopped caring what anyone thought of him. Even that didn't lift the resale. Today, Azteks in reasonable condition sit at the bottom of the pricing ladder for their era, not because they're mechanical disasters, because nobody wants to be seen in one, and no amount of pop culture rehabilitation has been enough to change that. Perception is everything. The Aztek was given a reputation on day one, and it never escaped it. 8 cars, 8 very different reasons for the fall. Bad timing, bad design, bad decisions made in boardrooms by people who'd stopped listening to the people actually buying the cars. The ones that hold value, the ones that earn loyalty across decades, tend to have something these 8 never quite managed. They made people feel something worth keeping, which raises a question worth sitting with. There are cars in showrooms right now that will look exactly like this in 20 years. The question is, which ones?